All right. So I have Bevan Colless here. He's from the Colless Group. So just a bit about his story before he starts sharing it with me. Where we run the Business of Allied Health podcast, which is supported by CliniScribe, and we sort of celebrate and try to get the practical lessons from different business owners. And he's one of the very established and successful ones, at least in my own interview experience so far. So Bevan bootstrapped the Collis Group from 2002 to currently still working as a physio apparently. It's got 15 clinics, physio clinics, a 24-hour gym, two recovery centers with over 130 staff, turning over apparently on LinkedIn over $10 million revenue per year. Welcome, Bevan.
Thank you, Barry. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me
Uh,
on.
all right. So yeah, tell us a bit about your story. Like maybe go back to your childhood. Why did you choose to be a physio to begin with?
It's a good question. A lot of people choose to go into physio because they went into a physio and had a good experience and saw the workplace and liked that idea. Whereas I never actually did. I grew up in a pretty humble household, youngest of six. So my parents couldn't really afford a physio, I don't think. So I never actually really went in and saw one. My first degree was actually in sports science, and I was thinking about becoming a PE teacher. A couple of other people who I studied with went back and did physio. And I actually went to Japan in between my degrees in 1994 and 95 and lived in Japan and actually I worked about four different jobs there, sometimes all in one day. But one of them was in an international high school, and that was terrific as a PE teacher. I did a 2 week block as well as some relief teaching. But I kind of thought, I think I would prefer to go into more of a one-on-one interaction than standing in front of the classroom all day and having to deal with teenagers all day. I always had a bit of a business streak in me. Looking back, I was always just seemed to view world through that business lens. And so when I started physio, I had the idea that I wanted to set up a physio clinic. I wasn't so interested in the sports stuff that lures a lot of people into the career.
Interesting. So were you setting up lemonade stands and things like that as a kid, or
Um,
what's your first
oh,
entrepreneurial?
my sister used to work at Kentucky Fried Chicken actually, and at
Nice.
the end of the day, she'd take home all the potatoes and gravies that weren't sold, and I used to heat them up in the morning in the microwave and put them out and sell them at recess at school to all the kids. So I was running a little underground Kentucky Fried Chicken
That's
market at
hilarious.
school.
What age was this? Love it.
I think I was probably 11 or 12. And my parents were, I was the youngest of six, and my dad was a university lecturer. So there was not a lot of money. So my parents had me out there delivering best and less brosses, as a 9-year-old in the neighborhood, sticking them. So that work ethic or that sort of drive that
Yeah,
was kind of drilled into me by my parents, I think. Mm.
love it. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of my 8-year-old son recently. So we're at Kooyong Tennis Club. So there's like refrigerated water coming from the taps. And it's like, Daddy, why don't we just get bottled, like empty bottles of water, fill it up and sell it as cold water? Anyway,
I'm sure a lot of bottled water is just from the tap.
yeah, it probably is. Yeah. Anyway, so when did you start your first practice? Did you graduate and then go into private practice working for someone, or did you found a
Yeah.
company?
So yeah, 94, 95, I worked in Tokyo, a bunch of different part-time jobs and had a blast, and then applied for physio while I was still overseas. Did physio from 96 to 99, and then started working in a physio clinic in Sydney. I bypassed hospital work, so I knew that wasn't really what I was interested in. Went straight into working for another clinic in South Coogee, Maroubra there, called Pro Therapy, and kind of learnt my trade there for 2.5 years. And then my mate was still living in Tokyo. He was a PE teacher, actually, the guy I did my first degree with. And there was a physio in Tokyo at the time running a clinic from her spare room in her house. She was married to a banker. She was, I guess, a trailing spouse. And my mate said, "Oh, look, Annie Miller's leaving. There's no one doing physio in Tokyo. You should set up." So my then wife, I met my wife at university and we traveled to Japan a little bit during the degree. And so we packed up a container full of treatment tables and shipped it out to Yokohama and showed up in April 2002 and thought we'd better find a place to open this clinic before the container arrived. So started trying to find real estate agents who would lease to foreigners and let us set up a business without much money. But then so we ended up finding this little 23 square meter apartment in Tokyo, but it was quite open plan and it laid itself into running a business, and the landlord was open to having us running a business in there. So we took a lease on that and opened the clinic about a month later and took over the previous physios. We gave her a little bit of money for her client list, I guess, and she left and we rolled on from there. And that was, 2000.
So I'm presuming you have an interest in snow sports originally?
Yes. So I, I'd always been a bit more drawn to the mountains than the sea, I guess, even though I'm from Sydney, but probably from the western suburbs of Sydney. Yeah, I didn't do a lot of skiing growing up because, as I mentioned, we couldn't afford it. But when I started in my 20s and late teens, I was like, yeah, I love this sport, and got into snowboarding pretty early. And then we never really chose Japan because of the skiing, but I knew you could do it there. I had done it in the 90s. And then when we were working in Tokyo, we used to go up to Niseko for our holidays every year and ski and snowboard there. And then each year you'd start to see more and more foreigners there. And so we sort of thought, oh, would people come to Japan for a ski holiday? That was a really that was a strange concept then. Not many people were coming to Japan for holidays. Not many people were skiing in Japan. And then every year you'd see more and more sort of Aussies initially, and you could just hear how much fun they were having, and they were having a ball. And so I sort of thought, oh, maybe there's a market for physio for them. So in 2005-06, my wife stayed in Tokyo and I went and we set up Niseko Physio. I did it on the third floor of this old building, and our poor patients used to have to climb up 2 flights of rickety stairs with their fresh ACLs, but they were happy to be seen by anyone, off in the sticks in Japan. And and then the whole skiing Japan thing just went from level to level to level. And then, 20 years later, here we are, it's still growing. So we've just sort of rode that wave and opened another 6 clinics in the ski resorts since then.
Oh, wow. And did you have to get re-registered there in Japan as a physio? Or
We don't actually need to get registered in Japan as a physio because it's a very different health culture there. It's actually written in Japanese law that physiotherapy is something the community needs. So if it's a cash paying patient and you're not using the national health insurance, then there's no need to be registered. So there's no restriction on the title, and we can get indemnity insurance from a Japanese insurer. So the registration is that's very convenient, obviously, and it's good for recruitment as well because it's very hard to get registered in Canada and North America. So most physios that want to do a ski season, they end up knocking on my door, Aussie physios anyway. So.
love it, love it. Usually, where there's less regulation, there's more entrepreneurial activity in general.
Yes,
Nice.
open politics, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We will only go into that and the federal budget, but anyway. So what were the biggest early challenges you had building that clinic and scaling it to today?
Oh, so many. Well, as you mentioned, we're bootstrapped, so we still own 100%. My wife and I still own 100% of all of our businesses and all of our clinics. So it's much easier if you take on debt, I guess, because you don't have those cash flow problems. We've had so many sleepless nights where you're not sure if you're going to be able to make paydays. Several times we haven't been able to make paydays and just asked for our staff to wait a few days because the credit cards in Japan often, well, better now, but they used to take like up to a month for the money to come into your account. And just the nature of seasonal businesses is really hard because you sort of feel rich in April at the end of the season. Your bank account's looking pretty good and you got a spring in your step, and then it just dwindles over the whole off season. And then by December, when you're waiting for the snow to fall, you've got to make a lot of expense up front. You've got to buy all these products. We sell a lot of braces and flight socks and crutches, and you've got to buy you've got to pay deposits. So there's a lot of money flowing out, and you're just praying that it snows, which fortunately Japan's got very, reliable snowfall, but you're often running on fumes come November, December, particularly if you're trying to grow and reinvest your profits. So it's a really tough challenge, that one. Mm.
Interesting. So cash flow is a key thing.
Cash
Cash flow
flow.
is king, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really challenging in the winter business, and particularly for us and the restaurant guys. I mean, the people that are selling holidays and there's the people that are selling hotel beds and even ski hire or ski lessons, those guys get deposits up front, so they've got that cash flow. Whereas if you're running a food and beverage or a service clinic, face-to-face service, you don't get any money until the lifts start turning. So
Yep.
it's pretty challenging. I've had to go in, look for emergency loans from time to time to get us through to certain low periods of cash flow. And then, of course, we had COVID, which is a whole other story. Certainly not in international tourism is not the industry you wanted to be in during that 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
So what did you guys do in the off season to compensate?
Well, we've done different things. Our first few years, when we moved out of Tokyo, we were living in Niseko, and we both got kind of obsessed with triathlon, my wife and I. So we used to kind of train like wannabe professional triathletes and fly around the world doing Ironmans. We probably did 20 Ironmans each and were qualifying for Hawaii every year and got obsessed with that. But then that was probably not sustainable long term. So we moved to Singapore and set up a clinic here where I am now in 2013. But as far as the business, the ski resorts, Japan's never really been able to make summers work like they have in Europe or Canada or North American ski resorts. They haven't really got the mountain biking going, and it's a much tougher market because people can't drive there. My customers or most of the tourists are all flying 6 to 8 hours to do ski, and people do that for skiing, but they don't necessarily do it to mountain bike or play golf. So summers are we just basically leak cash all summer and have to pay year-round rent, and the clinics
Wow.
sit there empty basically.
I presume it's stable now, or you've worked it out how to do it sustainably in the longer term.
Yeah, you just got to make good money during summer. That's all. Now we're fortunate that we've got clinics in Japan servicing the US military bases, which has been really good for us. We've got 2 clinics down in Okinawa and a new one opening actually on Monday in the outskirts of Tokyo in Yokota, which is an air base. So when the physio on base gets full, which they often are, they get referrals to come and see us, and we basically bill Uncle Sam directly, so we can keep some of our winter staff employed year round, and it takes a lot of the cash flow stress away from us actually. Yeah.
See, and is your wife a physio, or is she involved in the business as much as you? Or
She is a physio, and she's amazing. She's got a tremendous work ethic and is a real perfectionist. I'd say she's very good at the fine details. I'm a bit more of the big picture guy, I guess, who's not as detail orientated, but she's very good with the details. And we actually run a couple of cafes just because we had some spaces that we wanted to run physios in, Niseko and Hakuba, and they were a little bit too big for physios and had a food and beverage part. So we said, all right, why don't we just run a cafe? So she pretty much manages or operates those cafes as well. So yeah, she's an amazing force of energy. She's running our household and still seeing patients and still managing a couple of our clinics and being a great mum to our 9-year-old. Yeah, she's terrific.
great. And what was your secret to success during this whole period? If you had to reflect on how you're still surviving today rather than closing up shop in Japan and in Singapore,
Yeah,
given that.
it's a good question. I think you've got to be able to endure pain. That sounds a bit dark, but I think every entrepreneur has got those dark moments, where you are really struggling and they have that black cloud of owing people money hanging over you. It never really leaves you all day. It's kind of makes you feel that sick feeling in your gut. So you've got to learn how to deal with that. I think my other secret to success is that I just say yes. I just tend to, if I see an opportunity, I do a little bit of analysis to see if it's a good idea or not, but I don't get analysis paralysis. I'm just like, yep, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. Bang. And that's probably just, I think you don't want to be careless, I guess, but at the end of the day, you got to have a go, no go decision. And default is to go.
So that's very common trait in entrepreneurs. A lot of it's gut as well. You just get that vibe or feeling that like, this feels right. And often you can be wrong too, but hopefully you have more right than wrong overall. Yeah. So what's one key metric you measure in your physio businesses at the moment, in your gym and all the rest of it?
We have become a little bit KPI obsessed since we have gotten a lot more organized and got a lot of different KPIs, and we do a reporting where everybody reads out their KPIs, managers or individual physios. So we've got a lot. I think for me as a business owner, it's mainly just revenue. And now we're getting a bit of a clearer picture on our expenses and our pillars of businesses. It's always a lot. We didn't really know the profitability of each clinic because all the money was going into one bank account and was going out of the one bank account. It was really hard to track, but that's been a major goal of ours. So now we're tracking EBITDA, but probably the interesting one that we're about to roll out, which I think is going to be a winner, but a little bit of work involved in collecting it, is the percentage of your patients who are seeing another physio. Because I'm really quite big on having a cohesive team rather than every physio running John Smith Physio inside Singapore Physio or Tokyo Physio. I don't like the mentality that I saw this patient for the initial, therefore they're my patient and we're in an exclusive relationship and that patient can't see anyone else but me. We actually actively try and encourage a two-therapist system. So we are about to start tracking, if somebody's at 100% and none of their patients ever see another physio, then that is not a good metric for me. We want to aim for physios that are seeing patients who are more attached to the clinic rather than just the physio themselves. It's very hard. Not everybody will be open to that. But by the same token, I think physios, because of their ego and monetary sort of goals, tend to foster that exclusive relationship feel between physio and patient. So we're always
Really,
trying to fight against that.
that's a really interesting point you're making there. Sort of de-risks the business as well, doesn't it, as a whole, and not having less of a scarcity type of mindset that this is mine to keep, this is my patient. But
Yeah.
it is, it's like very ego driven. Yeah, no.
And if everybody's sharing patients, and then the patients will end up coming back more often because they might not be able to see you at a certain time. So the end result is more appointments shared amongst the same people. So people end up busier overall, but everybody's got to buy into that for that to work. And it does go a little bit against human nature because most physios are just looking at their own diary and they just want to be full.
Would you be happy to share some strategies in what you implement to do that or make that happen or encourage that?
So we have our all hands staff meeting every month, and I say it all the time. The policy of Asia Physio is not a one therapist exclusive relationship policy. Our policy is, in fact, a two patient policy. So we drill that into all the receptionists and all the staff. So hopefully they're not saying to the patient, "Oh, look, John's not available today and he's your physio." So we drill it into patients, and then we're starting to track this KPI. And during our all hands meeting, everybody reads out their KPIs. So everyone's got to say, my patient visit average is this. I got this many Google reviews, and we go around the grounds and everyone reads them out. So at our next
Wow.
meeting, people are going to have to say, yeah. So everybody does it. So it was a bit confronting, and our business consultant says, "You got to make people self-report. This is how all big businesses do it. They've got to stand up in front of the team and say, these are my numbers." And we had a bit of a pushback, but I think people actually don't mind it now and they're kind of used to it. And so they're going to have to say, 0% of my patients are seeing another physio, which is a little bit confronting for them,
Yeah,
and
it would be.
hopefully
It
that's
would
going
be.
to change some behavior.
Yeah. And I think you're telling me off this conversation that the laws are different, employment and performance management in Japan and Singapore versus Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say we don't want to start talking politics, but
Yep, of
I'm,
course.
I'm quite glad I'm not running a business in Australia, to be honest. I think there's a lot more freedom and smaller government in all aspects in Asia. Yeah, so we actually just probably not super proud of this, but we just introduced a policy because we're dealing with the US military. Their requirements on our notes and our justification for treatment is really onerous. They want to know exactly what their active military people are doing every single minute they're in the clinic, and you're dealing with a US insurance company. You've got to bill in these little 15-minute codes, and you've got to document that every treatment's got to be related to goal. So you can't get away with crappy notes, basically. So we just got audited, which they do 2-3 times a year. The US government, they pull up a bunch of our notes and read them, and they don't want to see patients being overserviced, and you've really got to justify why you're providing this treatment. So because and I'm not the best note taker in the world, so I feel a bit embarrassed lecturing other people about it because, it's not a strength of mine, but we've actually implemented a penalty that we're going to be doing our note auditing. And if you fail that note auditing, you're going to be fined a small percentage of your wage. And I believe we just certainly had pushback from that on our guys, but they're all earning very good money. It's quite shocking, particularly as Aussies, because you tend to think but in Japanese work culture, it's very common actually to have financial penalties for poor performance on the job. Yeah. From a broader perspective, that's probably why they make so many great things of great quality. And, we don't really make much of anything of good quality in Australia, apart from digging things out of the ground to sell to other people. But they're just a lot more of an perfectionist culture, and for Japanese people, if I was to introduce that in Japan, they'd probably just be like, yep, no problem. I haven't done my job correctly, so I just accept that penalty and I should have done my job better. But for Aussies, that's not kind of normal.
Oh, really interesting, man. Really global outlook you have. Actually apply as well. So, what's one lesson that you've learned that you'd love to share to others that maybe not popular or you haven't seen on social media or anything about getting to the level of success you are today for other allied health founders?
I think a simple lesson that I've always clung on to is pay yourself first. It's probably, and that I think if I didn't have that mentality, I wouldn't have been as able to grow as well as we have, because like I say, if you're bootstrapping, there are times where there's just not enough money, and you've got all these people that you owe money to and you don't have that money in your account. It's coming, you'll get to them, but so you've got to prioritize your expenses. And I think if you're Mr. Nice Guy, you can't stand owing people money and knowing that there's someone out there cursing your name all day because you're making them suffer because you haven't paid them, and you've got to be able to deal with that. But at the end of the day, I'll line if you don't have enough money and you've got all these expenses lined up, you've got to line them up in priority. And when I say pay yourself first, I don't mean me so I can have a holiday. I mean pay my team. Obviously the wages are first, and sometimes you got to prioritize and pay people late and be able to bear that stress of having knowing people that are out there angry at you because you haven't paid them. Hopefully we don't get ourselves in that financial situation, but I think every entrepreneur at some stage of their journey has those periods, and you do have to have quite a competitive, combative mindset. Particularly during COVID, we had 2.5, 3 years where we had huge amounts of money going out to pay rent, and pretty much no income because there was no tourism, and yeah, so you can easily find yourself in these situations where your debts far outweigh your capacity to pay them, and you've got to deal with that stress somehow. And partly that's sometimes causing other people some discomfort as well, unfortunately.
Love it. Very interesting. So, from our audience, what would you like to say to them or promote, or how can I help you there, Bevan? What are you looking for? Are you looking for physios who want to work in Japan, looking for business partners or anything like that at this stage?
Yeah. Yeah, we're always looking to recruit because we have, a turnover of staff every year in our ski resorts. So if anyone's out there looking to do a season in Japan or work in our military clinics, you can send an email to HR@asiaphysio.com. Yeah, we're also launching and improving our telephysio webpage, telephysio.com, where we're offering some telephysio, particularly for ACL. We've got a special interest in ACL and ACL healing management for people around the world because, every second patient's an acute ACL in the ski resorts. So we like to think we're pretty good at seeing those, particularly in that early phase where people are making those really important decisions and taking people through different bracing protocols as well to facilitate ACL healing and we can organize the MRI reading through, which is, probably the little bit of the bottleneck in the ACL management is that there's not many people out there in the world that know how to read ACL MRIs and correlate the findings with a healing potential. So we've got a really good radiologist who can do that online. And then, so if anyone needs any help with cross bracing protocol or any of the other bracing protocols that are out there to facilitate ACL healing, we offer that through telephysio.
Love it. All right. Thanks for your time, Bevan. It was fantastic to hear really unique insights there for an Australian physio. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Barry, and congratulations on what you've done with CliniScribe, mate. I think it's terrific. Wish you all the success there as well.
Thanks, mate.